You're listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks, a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation about leading and living worship. For more information, resources, and to get the book Worshipology, go to kurtisparks.com. Now, let's lean into today's episode.
Well, hey, thanks so much for listening to the Worshipology podcast. This is a conversation all about living and leading worship. It's biblical, practical, spiritual, and man, excited to have our guest today. I actually heard Isaac Gay. He was up at National Community Church, my old stomping grounds, and just dropping so much wisdom, and I couldn't wait to get him on the podcast. Isaac, say what's up, man.
Oh man, Kurtis, thank you for having me. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm so excited for the conversation today, bro.
Oh man, it's my honor, and just excited to just kind of hear a little bit more of your story, and then what you're up to today. I've been keeping on, the Parallel Society has been really inspiring, just seeing that online from a distance, and want to jump into some of that stuff. But man, just for our listeners, Isaac, dude, just share a little bit, like, how'd you get involved in, I know you were a worship leader up in New York City at Church of the City. We love John Tyson, and man, just so many cool things in your story. Bring our listeners up to speed, brother.
Yeah. Wow. Well, the short end of it was, I grew up in Virginia Beach. So I'm my dad. Yeah. My dad was, my parents they actually live in Germany. So my mom is German, and my dad was in the military and met her. And so I kind of grew up bicontinentally. So I grew up in Virginia Beach and in Germany simultaneously. And I think what that did, growing up with those two different cultures, it actually set me up pretty well for, what I do now, which is in a lot of ways interacting with folks that concede to secularism and to postmodernist, philosophies. Because that's Germany, man. Germany's like a bunch of successful, rich, smart people that don't think they need God, which is, in a lot of ways, when you're in the West nowadays, it's a similar motif. And so, man, I grew up in Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach is this weird space of, there's so many music artists that have come from the 757, Virginia Beach area. Missy Elliott, especially in like hip hop. So I grew up, I thought for a while I was going to be like the biracial Ed Sheeran, I was like,
let's go.
I was like, man, I was doing, some stuff here and there with some artists, but yeah, you have like Missy Elliott, Trey Songz, Chris Brown's from Tappahannock. You have, Pharrell and the Neptunes are from the area, so it's just like this. Jason Mraz from like Richmond area. So you just have this like crazy music scene. And so I grew up as an artist. My dad was a trumpet player, and my mom was the one that taught me classical guitar. So I just kind of grew up in an artistic family. When I was about 13, I got into dance pretty heavily and started doing ballet, and did ballet for the next 12 years. And that started to open my world to musical theater. That's what I ended up like pursuing, going to New York for, did some shows up in New York. And, but worship leading, man, I kind of say like I had a little bit of an Augustinian life. Like I love, like sin was fun. Like sinning was enjoyable. And so I was like, oftentimes like that famous prayer that Augustine said was like, Lord, not yet, kind of like that, just that idea of like, God, like, I've never questioned the existence of God. I've never questioned, I've never gone through a deconstruction of my faith from an existential standpoint. But yeah, man, sin is really enjoyable. So oftentimes I was like, oh yeah, Lord, just like not yet, God.
Wow.
So, so I was like leading, the classic story of like, leading worship on Sunday and the night before, doing things that I in these years regret. But by the grace of God, like, I just, I actually account where I am today to the prayers of my mother, my grandmother, like, those are, man, just such powerful things when you have generations that are just like interceding over your life, man, you can be as far gone as you want to go, man. You are, the hound of heaven is going to be chasing after you. So, so yeah, man, I mean, that's kind of how I, you know, through, you know, different events, one of which my now wife, Emily, at the time when we were in college, I was trying to date her pretty hard, and she was not really about it at all. And one day sat me down and was like, I thought that night, man, we were going to like make out. I thought it was all about to happen. And she was like, actually, Isaac, she was like, I think the Lord's calling you into a year of consecration. And I was like, oh, and deep inside, like, not even just, you know, the disappointment of, you know, of this really, you know, beautiful woman, just like, you know, rejecting me, was like the reality that set in of like, if I want, even if I don't end up with, which thankfully I did end up with her, but it was like, even if I don't end up with Emily, like this archetype of like the type of person that I want to be with, I need to start changing my actions. And so the Lord used my wife to get my heart, you know? And so, we ended up, in 2015. So after college, did some worship down in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's where I met like one of my good friends, Josh Baldwin. Met him down there. He was a worship pastor.
Love him. We just had him on the podcast, man.
Oh, JB. Yeah. Love Josh. So yeah, we were down at Queen City Church for a minute, which is where he was the worship pastor. Andy Squires. After him kind of took the reins for a bit. John Mark McMillan's dad was the pastor. And so we were down there, and really that was like the first time where Emily and I were like, oh, this might be more than just a proclivity that we have. You know, it might be more than just we have decent voices and I can strum, you know, a couple chords, you know, like maybe this is something that the Lord is calling us into. And so moved up to New York City in 2015. And shortly afterwards, so I did a show when I got up to New York, and then shortly after that, went to, at the time, Trinity Grace Church, which was a church network that John and Christy Tyson had planted, out of which Church of the City was birthed. So we were hired sometime in 2016. Hired, it was just the Tysons and us, man, just holding it down, the glory days, bro. And
dude.
Started a church with 75 people, and prayer room. My wife, she started the prayer room there at Church of the City, and and yeah, man, we were there for nearly, the next handful of years. We were there for a minute. And so that really, like, we started doing, you know, I was worship pastor my entire time over there. And out of that season of being at Church of the City was birthed really the ideology and the theology behind what is now Parallel Society, which is a nonprofit that we run full time. And so we're kind of in this space of being practitioners of like artists ourselves, songwriters, you know, working on a couple projects here and there with songs that we're trying to release, and then also running this nonprofit, which That's is incredible. aimed at like discipling artists. So it's kind of in a nutshell how we landed. Within that time, man, we took God's commission to be fruitful and multiply seriously. So we have 3 kids.
I love it.
3
what
boys
are their
under
ages?
6. We have our oldest, Simeon's about to be 6 in August. And then Silas is going to be 4 actually next week. And then Schaefer is just holding down that 2-year-old spot. He's rolling in hot.
You guys are in the thick of it, man.
Man, we're in the thick of it. Well, we love it,
amazing.
Man. The days are long, the years are short.
No, it's true, man. My son Moses turns 10 years old on Sunday. So we're just seeing the years flash before our eyes, and kids really let you know that life is finite. But also life is really long. So they let you know both of those simultaneously, man. Well, dude, I want to back up a little bit in your story because, you know, obviously now with the Parallel Society and you know, you have this, it's a really unique space that you guys walk in where you're, you know, working to engage the artist and the church, capital C. And a lot of it, you know, really goes back to, you know, those Renaissance days and those days of, you know, the Michelangelos being commissioned and whatnot. I want to dive into all that, but I mean, you have such a unique I think, perspective, being in one of the largest cities in the world, New York City, what would you say it was that in that season that you were doing ministry and worship and engaging with artists, you and your wife, her starting the prayer room, you on the worship side? I mean, that's a pretty powerful combo right there, prayer and worship together.
Yeah.
What were you guys learning in that season about culture in a city that really sets a lot of it?
Yeah.
And what were you learning about the church as a whole and how those two cross or they don't cross?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think one of the key learnings, I mean, I attribute a lot of my formation, I'm a big fan of like finding people that you can sit under and like learning, it's counterintuitive to our culture, to our cultural moment. My generation, is one that, we kind of grew up in an era where we were told like, everything. So humility is not a normal or a natural posture. So I'm just like I'm a big proponent for mentorship. And John is obviously one of the most formative voices in my life. And so having somebody like him, really, help steer kind of like my exposure, my quick exposure. It was like going into, I mean, it was a massive jump from Charlotte, North Carolina to basically daily, conversations with John in the heart of New York City about secularism in the church and church fall and, all of these things. And I think one of the things that I learned was, each generation of Christians is responsible to answer Matthew 28, which is the Great Commission where Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations. Every generation is responsible to answer that, from the times of, the early church and the disciples till the last AI Christian or whatever in the future. Who knows what the future holds, but the last Christian,
wow,
that is a responsibility that we have to answer that. And so I view, okay, how can we answer this? In many ways, that's missiology, the missions, and looking at our missiological moment through the lens of receptivity. How is the culture most receptive in this day and age to the gospel? And that isn't to condone like, twisting the word of God or anything like that, but it is to say, there are different time frames in history where a transcendental, so goodness, truth, and beauty, are the three transcendentals. These were actually birthed in non-Christian thought spaces. So Plato and Aristotle were actually the first ones to start saying there are these cosmic values out in the world that the human heart is bent towards. We recognize true goodness in a sense. We recognize in that way, like what is actually beautiful. And those things are tethered to Hans Urs von Balthasar, who was a theologian, said that there are three sisters. They cannot be separated. But at different times, one of the sisters goes to the forefront and is the tip of the spear in that cultural moment. So I would argue in the early church, acts of goodness were just so poignant, so prevalent, so powerful to the imagination of that culture. So you have, the Cyprian plague in the 3rd century, where you got, everybody starts dying and the only people that are staying are Christians in Rome. And so, the Christianization of Rome, a lot of people just attribute it to Constantine, but it's actually a little bit darker than that. Everybody died except for the Christians. The brothers and sisters were staying there. And so they didn't really have anything left except for Christians. So that was an act of goodness. And then, I think a pretty, prevalent example, let's say, of truth would be, the Protestant Reformation. Regardless of its rights or wrongs, it did great things. It also brought some things that were, maybe now we're seeing, maybe the underbelly of it. But that was a pursuit of truth. 99 Thesis, fallibility of the Pope, all of these things were at least a desire for truth. So truth was at the forefront of that. Man, if you tried to do that nowadays, like when people, I hear this all the time, and I'm like, I just don't agree with it. When people are like, you just can't argue with truth. And I'm like, actually turns out that like 7 billion people argue with truth.
Right.
So I'm not sure if that statement holds the same weight. I understand the connotation. I don't know if it holds the same weight. So we concede to the idea that in an age where everyone's trying to be good, like activism is rampant. You can be an activist for the most minuscule, subcategory of people or causes. Like if you're not trying to be good, you're going to be canceled. And then at the same time, truth has become relativized. Your truth is your truth. As long as you don't hurt somebody, you can be and do what you want. So truth, in a way, truth and goodness, they've lost this cementing fundamental objectivity. And so we would actually say that in a culture like that, beauty is the apologetic. And therefore, I would argue that artists are the evangelists that we need. And if that's the case, then man, like, that ancient relationship between the church and the artist needs to be reinstated for sure.
I feel like I just got a history lesson and a butt kicking all in one, man. Like that's pretty powerful. I mean, and you're totally right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like, I mean, everybody you talk to, whatever their belief system may be, has this idealism of like being a good person, which usually is called, tied to causes and movements and whatnot. And then, 2016 word of the year, post-truth, it's like we are living in that era. And, you mentioned earlier in the conversation about Germany kind of being in that mindset for quite a while. Of course, the UK probably 20 years ahead of us in their post-truth and their post-Christian culture. And you're starting to see that ramp up pretty quickly here. So yeah, I think it's amazing how you just unpack that with goodness and truth. Kind of, maybe they've lost a bit of that, honor, if I could even put it that way, in a culture, but then beauty, and everybody recognizes beauty. I want you to unpack that phrase, beauty is the apologetic, for a little bit. Because I think for our listeners, and obviously apologetics, like defending the faith and whatnot, and it goes way beyond that, but just as a, quick 1-sentence thing, what does that mean for beauty to be an apologetic, and how do we embrace that as artists, creatives, songwriters, worship leaders, even going into the pastoral realm as teachers and sermon writers, if you will? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll start off with this. Beauty cannot only be your actions. It has to be the life that you live. Otherwise, at best, it's hypocritical. You know what I'm saying? Like,
that's good.
If you're making beautiful art, but you're treating people, you're dehumanizing people. There's an incongruence there that you might be able to you might be able to play it for a while, but the human heart is just, I think the human heart is we are creatures, like C.S. Lewis says, like if you have all of these desires that can't be quenched on earth, maybe you're made for another world. And we are, the heart is deceptive. It's deceitful. Like that's what the word says. And we are foreigners. We're nomads in a distant land, and our hearts are always, I mean, Augustine said it, we're restless until we find rest in you. Our hearts are searching for home, I was reading that passage recently in Ephesians where Paul says, I count everything as lost to know the surpassing worth of Christ. And he says this like beautiful little phrase, and it's like, and to be found in him. Like our hearts long, they ache to be found in Christ. And so I think the human heart will recognize hypocrisy. And I think that's what you're seeing at large is a generation that has like recognized it. And now like the cap's just broken and it's like, oh man, like, that along with, I think God is like, I think he's just like, purifying his church. But beauty is the apologetic, man. I mean, I think one of the, obviously one of the most famous phrases was Dostoevsky, Fyodor Dostoevsky, the author, Russian author. He wrote in his book, The Idiot, that's what that line comes from, that beauty will save the world. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was Pulitzer Prize, dissident to communism and a writer, he said in the 1970s when he won the Pulitzer, he said like, this isn't just like a naive, dream. It's actually a prophetic vision. And it's just this idea, man, like, there is something to the heart being a compass for things that are beautiful. And I don't even just think you have to be a theist. I don't think you have to believe in a God to recognize beauty. So for instance, the Nuremberg trials, I think, are a really beautiful example of the human heart recognizing ugliness.
Yeah.
And I think you have to, in order to see beauty, you have to recognize ugliness. And that's one of maybe the subverting, like, again, like, it's like, how is the culture most receptive to the gospel? Well, I think it's like, yeah, man, like, it's hard to be like, well, this thing is true because this is not true. You know, like, that was a cementing part of philosophy, you know, and synthesis and antithesis. And it was this idea of like, well, if this is true, then this has to be false, you know, just by sheer like logic. That isn't there anymore. That's no longer the philosophical structure that we look at. We now have experience as well, which then just like takes everything into this like little bowl of jambalaya, which ends up being like my experience and my thought. And so it's like, okay, if that's no longer the way in which you can point to, you know, defend the faith apologetics, and goodness, you know, it still has a little bit more. I would say goodness still has a little bit like there is an area where people be like, that just doesn't feel like a good act. But beauty, I feel like, is like the human heart can still recognize ugliness. And the Nuremberg trials, like I said, is like an example of that, where you had people that were not Christians that were like, this was wrong and needs to be punished. Yeah. It's not just enough just to like be like, oh, slap on the wrist. Like, it actually needs to be punished. You know, like that. There's how else do you explain? And there's another one. You know, Os Guinness talks about this in his book Signals of Transcendence. W.H. Auden, who was a poet and essentially also with the horrors of Nazism, basically was like, it's not just like the acts of Hitler they're not subjective. You know, like there is objective ugliness. And he says this, like, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially like, I had to be able to find something to condemn his actions absolutely. And that led him to becoming a Christian. And I mean, he was like, my relativism cannot handle this absolute evil. And so I need to find something that can judge this absolutely.
I need to have a ground to stand on. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's where I would say like beauty. So I think beauty, yes, from an aesthetic standpoint. So I do believe artists shape culture. You know, I believe that legislation follows the artistic movements that come beforehand. You know, I think about back when, you know, what was it, 2021, when Lil Nas X came out with Montero, you know, Save Me By My Name. Yeah. And I live half a mile from the Misfits. I think it was Misfits. Was it Misfits? Like whatever the agency that helped design with Nike the shoe that he made. Yeah. And they like put human blood in it. They put like 666 all over it. Like they were doing this like pseudo Satanistic ritual over these shoes, and they sold out in like 20 minutes. Like it was nuts, bro. They sold out so quickly, and I was like, and I was sitting there, and I'm like, dang, like this dude is coming out of the gate hot, like giving Satan a lap dance in this video, like he is not holding back. And I'm like, you know who's influencing? Yeah, I tell this sometimes to like people I'm having to talk with. I'm like, you know, especially those in the older generation, I'm like, Biden's not influencing your kids. Harris isn't influencing your kids. You know who's influencing your kids? Montero.
You're right.
Satan, like getting a lap dance from Lil Nas X, that's influencing your kids, you know? Wow. And so I'm like, if that is the case, and artists shape the narrative, they push the boundaries of the horizons of possibility, to quote Andy Crouch. Like, if that's the case, then as the church, like the world hasn't forgotten the power of artists. The church, I would argue, maybe has. And in that case, we need to recapture our vision for creativity. It's what it does. And I'm sorry, I'm a little long-winded in answering your question.
No, this is so good. This is so good.
What it does is, you know, I think part of maybe the critique that the world has on the church is like, it's so militaristic. Like it's so it's like the worst of capitalism and the worst of military language. And And I think what creativity and what beauty does is it changes this from like, we need to reclaim this for Christ, to being like, no, we need to just reclaim our vision for creativity. And we just need to create. And out of that paradigm, the culture will follow the most compelling narrative. The problem is we have just conceded our culture making. And so we're just playing catch up and follow up to everything that the world's creating. And so we're looking like copycats, and then we're getting really angry and using militaristic, harsh language when we're like, well, we need to get it back. And it's like, actually, bro, I don't think that is not the most compelling way of the gospel. Like the disciples wanted Jesus to be a military leader. And he raises from the dead and goes and spends 40 days with his homies, who all like basically turned their backs on him. And he's doing things that he's not going to Rome, standing in front of Caesar and being like, hey, I'm actually the real king, so please get off my seat. Like, he's going and hanging out, like tell Peter, the guy that denied me 3 times, that I've been raised from the dead. Like, that's what he tells Mary, Mary Magdalene. And so there is this, I think, this theological and scriptural backing to being like, I don't think that like spiritual warfare is not against flesh and blood, but it's against principalities. And I'm like, I think the way that you do spiritual warfare with the flesh is by acts of kindness, goodness, beauty, fruit of the spirit, all that stuff. So yeah, I think beauty, that's when I say like beauty is the apologetic. I'm like, yeah, I think through art, I think the human heart, it can be subverted. Like, art subverts in many ways rational resistance towards the divine. It's like, thinking about this, man, the most secular cities in the world have the most world-renowned museums.
You're right.
So it's like, you go to New York and it's like MoMA. You go to Paris, you have, the d'Orsay or the Louvre. And it's like, it's like people are like, nah, man, I don't believe in God, but dang, I just want to get lost looking at the Mona Lisa. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like art has some kind of power. And then I think, if you couple that with acts of beauty, I think that is, again, with that whole idea of like, how is the culture receptive to the gospel, to answer Matthew 28 in our time? I think this is our best shot in our cultural moment.
Talk to me a little bit about, as the church, from the side of like maybe pastors and leaders in the church, what can we do? What's that one step that we need to take that could start tomorrow, where it's better engaging the artist, the Renaissance movement of today? And I got to sit under your teaching and hear you talk about the idea of like, man, quit. And I love how you just put that, like how the world views the church, but then we've been given the greatest calling, the greatest narrative, the greatest story to carry. Why don't we couple that with the greatest artist, the greatest art, the greatest, what's one way that we can do that? Be a better engager of culture and be a better platform to celebrate artists and give them an opportunity to share in that narrative, man.
That's such a great question, man. I think it's like, starting with the end game in mind. Like, what's the end goal? The end goal, in my opinion, one of the end goals that I keep in the forefront of my mind is, and obviously, like I said, like holding fidelity to Scripture and what Jesus has commissioned to us. But parallel to that would be, what has the Sistine Chapel? What have these great pieces of art done over the ages? Well, what they've done is they've done 2 things. Like, they are incredible tools that they're almost like they're portals. J.K. Smith says, like, the invisible is not a barrier. The visible is not a barrier to the invisible. It's a portal. So they're portals to the divine, I believe. Yeah. I believe, like, you don't have to be, you have to follow Jesus to go to the Sistine Chapel and look at, the ceiling and be like, ooh.
Yeah.
Man, maybe there's something outside of this latte that I'm holding in my hand. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Like, there's something beyond that. But then I think the other thing that it does is it reminds Christians to keep fidelity to Jesus, regardless of the persecution that they might face. And we in the West, we don't, we might face ideological persecution. We're not facing necessarily physical persecution like some of our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world. But I think even if that does come, Like, I do think that what this like transcendent art can do is it can just remind us to keep fidelity to Christ. It can be these signposts of fidelity, being like, yeah, gosh. And I think so. I think like, what should be our end goal? It's like, who's building that Sistine Chapel? Where's the next Michelangelo? Like, we're struggling. We are struggling right now. I mean, you don't have to go far to read, like, art has been, I read this, there's this columnist, he has a Substack that's so good. It's called The Honest Broker. And he wrote this piece like a month ago about how art is being destroyed by entertainment, how entertainment is being destroyed by distraction, and how distraction is being engulfed by addiction. And he basically says the end goal of media and technological conglomerates is addiction. It is the technological, what does he say? He's the dopamine cartel. That's how he names it. And he's like, that is the end goal, is addiction. And so we're in a time where beauty and art is, I mean, it is definitely taking a hit, because art takes time. It takes intentionality. It's slow. Even if it comes to you overnight, it's slow. That's after years and years and years of going into the studio. And we just live in an overnight success, swipe up, prime kind of world. Immediacy is our currency currently. And so, I do think like art is, taking definitely a hit. And so I think what should be, the end goal, it's like, we need to build, and I'm using just like that as an example, but you can use tons of other examples, but we need to build the next Sistine Chapel. And in order to do that, we need to find, like what I want to do is find Michelangelo, disciple him in rich theology of creating. But then it takes the church, it takes partnership with the church in order to do that. I love philanthropy. I love philanthropists. Honestly, anyone that's listening who might have a couple billion, it's like, hey, I love you. Thank you for your work. And I'm happy to schedule anytime, anywhere meetings with you. But philanthropy is in a way almost a critique of the church's, mishap. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like,
yeah.
If the church, if we really continued the patronage, at least in this regard of getting, pieces created, and art commission, and in these kind of ways, like if we really continued our carrying the mantle of patronage, I'm not sure. I think philanthropy would become just like a side little bonus to it, rather than the main way. If you look at it, the main way, like that, anything that has the umbrella of redemptive underneath is getting, is being made is by people that have a vision for it and probably have their own funds and are doing this, And so I think, for pastors, I mean, I consider myself still, I don't know if I don't know if the calling of pastor ever leaves or whatever, but for those that are vocationally leading local ministries, and I recognize, some churches, can barely, keep the salary of one person, and others, it's like, you got a dope espresso machine in your staff office. So I recognize there's a spectrum there, but I do think a step forward is creating intentional space for artists, where there isn't necessarily a product at the end of it. Like, you're gathering not just to have an outcome. Now, I'm a big proponent for Sunday is coming. You gotta, things have to happen. So I think if you and I only hung out when there was a utility that was needed, it wouldn't be as deep of a, neither of us would feel the level of value that probably we actually feel towards one another. But if we actually just hung out, and
no agenda,
and had no agenda, just got to know one another, there would be a foundation of that. There would be a trust. Patrick Lancioni, who's like an organizational guru, is saying for a healthy team, there has to be a level of trust. There would be a layer of trust that then, yes, like, you know, all of the products needed and all of the outcomes that are required, there would be a layer there that we'd be working off of. And I just think, like, currently speaking, we're playing at a deficit as the church, playing at a deficit because we've dealt with artists for a while now as product management, and that has caused an already fragile relationship. It's just caused it to get more and more fickle, and so I think, like, creating intentional space for the artists in your community is like a step that we can take towards rectifying that relationship. I also think, like, as a parent, you get this. It's like, I see the value of my kids, and so I try to give my kids the best of my time and the best of my resources. Why? Is it because I want something in return from them? No, it's because I see the potential in them. And so I think if we see the potential in artists to being the frontline evangelists in our time, then we need to give them time, like I just mentioned, but then also resources. We need to disciple them. And because you see the value in it. And so I think, creating intentional space. So, like, this is not meant to be a plug, but it's going to sound like a plug. Like, we made like a course, like a 9-part course, like around a theology of creativity that's meant to come alongside and help the local church pastor who has the commission from Jesus to pastor and to disciple his people or her people. And it is meant to just ease the weight. And so it's like, giving your time and your resources to the artists in your community, I think, are two really great steps. And then, lastly, I would say, if you do have the financial means, ease the load that an artist feels. What are the two pain points that artists have? It's money and space. You see a kid, see this all the time in New York, but you see this at any major city. It's like, kid comes for, let's say, Broadway, starts working at Starbucks, and in order to pay rent in their 500 square foot studio that they're sharing with 3 other people, they're working 70 hours a week. They have no time to actually work on their craft. And so it's like, if the church could actually ease that load, and artist residencies, I think, are great steps in the right direction of saying, hey, we're actually going to ease this load that you have of whatever, even if it's supplemental income, so that you can create. And then I would say the second is, the subcategory to that is, like, creating space for the artist to create. If you have, we would do this in New York, where we had a prayer room, and so there would be prayer sets happening. And then on the off hours, we would open it up to the artists within our community to create, and some artists outside of our community. So I think those are, like, some practical steps forward that we can take in this long journey.
Good. That's really good. The time and resources thing makes so much sense, and what better way to engage people. And I think those are easy stepping stones for us to take as the church, and just, in general, just followers of Christ, inviting in. I once heard John Mark Comer say a pastor's life is one of invitation and example. And I think, we can say all we want that we value artists, but until you lead by that example and you live by that invitation, it's just a nice thought off in the clouds, man. That's so good. Well, dude, Isaac, I feel like I've been drinking from a fire hose. This has been incredible, man. I just want to ask you something that I get the privilege of asking artists, worship leaders, songwriters, creatives, pastors all over the place. I love to close out our podcast with one simple question. What's the Holy Spirit been speaking to you as of late, man? Love to hear that.
He's been revealing how many layers of fallback securities I have before the layer of Jesus is all that I have.
Wow.
I have so many layers before Jesus. And I think he's just been revealing and inviting me to, John 15, we all love. I'm the vine, you're the branch. My Father is the gardener. That scripture is so good. So good. Yeah, bless his name. There's one part of it that I hate, but it's so needed. It says, the branch that produces fruit, I prune.
Yep.
And just like a few verses before, it's like, the branch that doesn't like cut away, and pruning can often feel like being cut. Like it can feel, it's just like, oh my gosh, like pruning is painful.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the Holy Spirit is speaking, is like, like salvation isn't a moment, sanctification takes a lifetime. And it's this continuous journey of the Lord saying, I want all of your heart. I don't want to share it. And man, I'll tell you, as somebody who was a professional Christian for a while now, it is so easy for us to rely and to share our hearts with ministry, with success, I'd like to think that I'm not a prosperity gospel guy in the ways that maybe we've seen it in the last 20, 50 years. Man, if I'm honest though, oh bro, I'm so formed by prosperity gospel. I don't want my ministry not to be up and to the right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I don't want the things that I touch not to be successful in a worldly standpoint. And I think like the Holy Spirit's just inviting me to be like, am I enough?
Wow.
Because right now you're sharing your heart. You're sharing your heart right now. And it's just, the hand of the gardener, man, it's like pruning can be painful, but it's kind and it's loving. And
wow.
He doesn't give you a snake when you ask he doesn't give you a stone when you ask for bread. And so all that stuff, man, is like what he's speaking. I think like for anyone who's listening, it's like, yeah, I think the Lord is looking for people to give influence, like worldly influence to. Like I genuinely think like the Lord is looking for people. Our call is to be, kings and priests and to steward creation back to its original intention. But he's looking for people he can entrust that to. And there's a difference between longing for influence sake. There's a difference between that and saying, God, even if my influence is just over my family, help me strengthen my feeble knees so that I could actually carry the weight, that I could keep fidelity to you, and actually that your name would be famous. Habakkuk 3:2, we want to see the fame and deeds of God known in our time. It's like help my actions increase your fame. And so I think that just requires, for that to happen, it just requires a ton of pruning, because God's looking for the people that can actually carry that. So that's kind of what I feel like the Holy Spirit's like teaching me, and it at times like really hurts.
Oh my gosh, man. Well, I appreciate your vulnerability in that, and just kind of giving us a window into your conversation with God, man, because I think a lot of people would resonate with that we do create these layers of safety, and it's like, man, all these pillows, and then we hit rock bottom, we find out what's really there at the end of the day. And man, so powerful. This conversation has really challenged me, and I know it's challenging everybody that's listening to it. We're going to put links on the show notes to Parallel Society, how you can connect with Isaac, how you can get more information on that course, because that's going to be so valuable. And if you're part of a church, man, I just want to encourage you, like, pick that thing up, because like you said, beauty is the apologetic. Man, I'm going to be living with that in my brain for quite some time now, man. Appreciate you, bro. Thank you for your time, man.
Thank you for having me, man. This is such an honor. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks. To learn more and find resources for your team, you can visit kurtisparks.com and grab the book at worshipologybook.com.